What if a president could serve for 8 consecutive years with no possibility of re-election? One election, 8 years in office. Then they leave. At first, that sounds surprisingly clean. The president wins once, governs for a full 8 years, and never has to spend part of the job trying to win the job again. There is no second presidential campaign hanging over every decision, and no need to shape the first half of the presidency around the next election. That could make the office more focused, maybe even more honest. But removing re-election does not only remove a campaign, it also removes the moment when voters get to look at 4 years of actual results and decide whether they want 4 more. So the real question is not simply whether 8 years is too long, it is whether the country would gain enough presidential independence to justify losing that second judgment from the public. That is what I want to figure out. The strongest case for one 8-year term is easy to understand. A president who knows from the first day that they can never run again may govern differently. They do not need to spend years protecting their personal political future or worrying that one unpopular decision will destroy their next campaign. Imagine a president believes a policy will be painful for 2 years, but useful over 10. Under the current structure, those painful years may arrive just before the president asks voters for another term. Even if the policy is genuinely useful in the long run, there is a strong political reason to delay it, soften it, or avoid it altogether. A president with one guaranteed 8-year term may feel freer to say that the decision will be difficult now but worth it later. They may also feel less dependent on their own party because they do not need party leaders, donors, or campaign organizations to help them win the presidency again. In theory, that creates more room to ask what the right decision is and less reason to ask what helps me win again. That sounds like a serious advantage, but independence always raises another question. Independent from who? Removing re-election does not remove politics from the presidency. The president still needs Congress. They still rely on advisors. They still care about their party, their reputation, and their legacy. Organized groups still make arguments. Foreign governments still negotiate. Political pressure remains. The president becomes free from one particular pressure, the need to personally win another presidential election. And that pressure was doing 2 jobs at once. It could make presidents overly political, but it also gave voters another chance to judge them. That is the trade. Imagine voters elect a president, and 2 years later realize they made the wrong choice. The president is not handling the job well. They make poor decisions, refuse to change course, or simply turn out to be much less capable than people expected. There are still 6 years left. That is a long time to live with one electoral mistake. Before someone becomes president, voters are making a prediction. They listen to speeches, watch debates, look at experience, and try to imagine what that person will be like once real power arrives. After 4 years, they no longer have to imagine. They have evidence. They have seen how the president behaves under pressure, who they listen to, how they respond to failure, and how they use power. A campaign is a prediction. A presidency is evidence. Under one 8-year term, the country learns more about the president, while losing the direct presidential vote that would normally let it act on what it learned. That may be the biggest cost of the system. The original election becomes much more important precisely because correcting it becomes much harder. Supporters of the idea might say voters still have other tools, and they would be right. The public could still vote in congressional elections. If people become unhappy with the president, they could elect a Congress that opposes the administration and makes it much harder to pass laws, approve budgets, or confirm appointments. That would create a new kind of pressure, but it would not be the same as correcting the original choice. Imagine voters strongly reject the president after 2 years and elect a Congress whose main purpose is to stop the administration. The president still has 6 years left, so the public has not replaced the leader. It has built resistance around the leader. That may protect the country from some bad decisions. It may also create years of conflict between a president claiming authority from the original election and a Congress claiming a newer message from voters. Both sides can say the public chose them. Neither side is going anywhere quickly, so congressional elections could become almost like indirect referendums on a president who cannot actually be removed through those elections. That might create healthy checks, or it might create long periods of institutional warfare whenever public opinion changes sharply. The president's own party would change too. At first, the president may become more independent from party leaders because they no longer need their help to win again. But the party itself is still thinking about the next election because the president is guaranteed to leave after 8 years. So when does succession politics begin? Maybe in year 6, maybe year 5, maybe earlier. Potential candidates may start building their own support while the president is still governing. Some will defend the administration. Others will begin separating themselves from it. Party leaders may start thinking about the next candidate before the current president is close to leaving. That creates a strange effect. The president no longer has to think about personal re-election, but almost everyone around the presidency may still be thinking about the next presidential election. So electoral politics does not disappear, it moves. The president may become personally freer while the party becomes more focused on succession. One 8-year term would also make each presidential election heavier. A president has 8 guaranteed years to make appointments, shape agencies, choose senior officials, and influence institutions that may last beyond the administration itself. The exact impact would depend on circumstances, but the basic point is simple. One election could shape the government for much longer than 8 years. That makes the original vote more consequential. And because there is no presidential review after 4 years, losing that election becomes more expensive too. Fewer presidential elections do not necessarily mean less political intensity. They may concentrate it. Every side could tell voters that if the other candidate wins, the country is stuck with them for 8 years. Campaigns may become more negative and more fearful because the cost of losing feels larger. Voters might become more careful. Parties might become more cautious about choosing inexperienced candidates. But fear could also become more powerful. People may support someone they do not really trust because they are terrified of the alternative. So one 8-year election could become an even larger political battle than 2 separate judgments 4 years apart. That matters because elections are never perfect. People vote with incomplete information. Candidates change once they gain power. Unexpected crises happen. Governing reveals qualities campaigning cannot. An 8-year system asks voters to make one large prediction and then gives that prediction much more time to be right or wrong. There is also a real advantage to the longer timeline. Modern governments deal with problems that do not fit neatly inside 4 years. Infrastructure, energy, major reforms, foreign policy, and long negotiations often take time to produce results. A president who knows they have 8 years may be able to start something, adjust it, and see more of what happens before leaving office. Foreign governments know they are likely to deal with the same administration for years. Congress knows the president is not disappearing after one short term. Long-term projects may become easier to plan. That continuity could be valuable. But the same fixed timeline creates a new problem near the end. Imagine the president reaches year 7. Everyone knows they will soon be gone. The next candidates are already preparing. Congress is thinking about the next administration. Foreign governments can see the clock. Companies can see the clock. Political allies can see the clock. Some people may simply wait. A foreign government may delay a negotiation because it expects a better deal from the next president. Members of Congress may stop making long-term compromises. Political groups may decide that fighting the current administration is less useful than preparing for the next one. The president still has the legal power of the office, but political influence may begin leaking away. So the fixed term could create 2 very different presidencies. A strong early presidency with guaranteed time, followed by a weaker late presidency, where everyone can see the finish line. Or the opposite could happen. A president in the final years may become more willing to act precisely because there is no future election to lose. They may challenge powerful interests, take difficult decisions, or stop worrying about short-term popularity. That could create courage. It could also create recklessness. A president with nothing left to win politically may feel they have less to lose politically too. The system cannot assume that extra freedom will always be used wisely. That is one of the hardest things about designing political rules. You are not designing them for the person you hope wins. You are designing them for whoever eventually does. Then there is the good president problem. Suppose the country elects someone excellent. They govern well, remain popular, and after 8 years most voters want them to continue. They cannot. There is a strong argument for that. A democracy should not become dependent on one person, and a guaranteed ending prevents a successful president from turning popularity into a permanent hold on power. But the rule also removes a choice from voters. The public may say that after 8 years they know exactly what this president is like and still want them to continue. The system answers that they are not allowed. That creates an interesting symmetry. A bad president cannot be rejected after 4 years. A good president cannot be renewed after 8. In both cases, the fixed rule replaces voter judgment. that may still be worth it. Political systems often limit what voters can choose when the goal is preventing too much power from accumulating in one place. But the trade should be honest. A single 8-year term is not only a limit on the president, it is also a limit on what voters are allowed to decide. That brings us back to accountability. If ordinary voters lose the second presidential election, other political pressures do not disappear. Congress still negotiates with the administration. Party leaders still matter. Organized groups still push their interests. Advisors still have access. The system removes one major moment when the president has to personally ask the whole country for another term while leaving most other pressures intact. That does not mean voters become powerless. Public opinion still matters. Congressional elections still matter. Protests, investigations, journalism, and institutional checks still matter. But none of them perform exactly the same function as reelection. Reelection is a review. The public gets to compare the candidate it was promised with the president it actually received, and then make another decision that is difficult to replace. So what would one 8-year term actually give us? Potentially more continuity, less personal campaigning, more willingness to make unpopular decisions, and more room for long-term planning. Those are real advantages. The costs are real too. A bad choice lasts longer. Voters lose the clearest opportunity to compare promises with performance. Congressional elections may become the main battlefield for frustration. The one presidential election that remains may become even more intense. Succession politics may begin years before the president leaves, and the final part of the term may weaken as everyone starts waiting for whoever comes next. The hardest trade is still the same. The system removes voter judgment in both directions. A bad president cannot be rejected halfway through. A good president cannot be renewed at the end. So would I choose it? I can see why someone would. There is something appealing about telling a president that they have 8 years, cannot run again, and should stop campaigning and govern. But the re-election campaign we want to remove is tied to the accountability we may want to keep. The same election that can make a president behave politically also gives the public another chance to judge what the president has actually done. So maybe the real question is not whether 8 years is a better amount of time. It is whether presidential independence is worth making electoral mistakes harder to correct. Would we get leaders who think further ahead, or leaders who simply know they are harder to remove? Would the country become more stable, or would one bad election create years of conflict? Would presidents become freer from politics, or would politics simply move into Congress, party succession, and the one enormous election that remains? That is what makes the idea difficult. The system gains independence, but it sacrifices correction. And whether that trade is worth it may depend on which danger you fear more. A president who spends too much time trying to win again, or a president who no longer has to ask voters for the job again at all. So where do you land? Would you rather give a president one 8-year term or keep the current system? And if you like breaking political systems down like this and rebuilding them from scratch, subscribe. There are a lot more questions like this to test.